welcome to this side event. We're going to discuss mine action as a peace-building tool, and we're going to look at the Colombia example, the transitional restorative approach. So our objective is to discuss the progress and the challenges of implementing humanitarian mine action restorative measures within transitional justice, specifically focusing on the Colombian experience. By addressing land contamination as a conflict-related harm, we seek to evaluate how mine action pillars, risk education, victim assistance, clearance, advocacy, stockpile destruction, can restore safety and dignity to victims and affected communities, ensuring a sustainable, victim-centered recovery for explosive ordnance-affected territories. So my name is Christelle Loup-Forest. I'm UNMAS representative here in Geneva, and it is my great honor to introduce to you the panel. So to my left, we have Ambassador Tobias Privitelli, who is currently the director of the Geneva International Center for Humanitarian Demining, GICHD. And Ambassador Privitelli became director of the GICHD in 2024. He's a Swiss diplomat with a PhD in contemporary history. His career at the Federal Department for Foreign Affairs has focused on armed conflict, multilateralism, and peace policy. His experience includes roles in the Swiss mediation team between the Russian Federation and Georgia, in the OSCE work on the conflict in Ukraine, and as Deputy High Representative for Bosnia and Herzegovina, overseeing the implementation of the Dayton Peace Agreements. What an honor to have you, Tobias, on this, on this panel. Secondly, we have Mr. Antonio Armentano, who is the chief of the UNMAS Mine Action Program in Colombia. So Antonio has 15 years experience in leading complex humanitarian programs in a variety of challenging contexts across Africa, Europe, the Middle East, and Latin America. He works extensively in humanitarian mine action, physical security, and stockpile management, and also weapons and ammunition management. Welcome, Antonio. Thirdly, we have Ms. Donatella Rostagno. Thank you for joining us. Donatella brings both experience in the field, extensive experience, I would say, in sub-Saharan Africa, alongside mediation support and political analysis. With 25 years of experience supporting CSOs, she possesses a thorough expertise in translating field analysis into policy guidance for institutional actions and to strengthen the intervention on human rights and conflict prevention. And I just make a little parenthesis to say that this year, mine action is on the agenda of the Human Rights Council. For the first time in history, the Human Rights Council has asked the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights to submit a report on the impact of anti-personnel mines on the enjoyment of human rights. So 2026 for me is the year where we're going to speak to the human rights community and let them advocate with us for mine action, because so many human rights depend on the work of mine action. So I close the parenthesis here. Welcome, Donatella. We also have with us Mr. Mauricio Silva, who is the coordinator of the Colombia Mine Action Group. Mr. Silva brings nearly 2 decades of experience in mine action. He currently serves as coordinator of the ICMA Group at the Office of the Commissioner for Peace, where he provides strategic direction and oversees interinstitutional coordination of Colombia's National Mine Action Program. He previously served as Chief of Mission for Mine Action in Colombia with the OAS, the Organization of American States. Welcome, Mauricio. Really great to have you here with us. And finally, we will have online Mr. Rosberg Leguizamon, who is working with the Special Jurisdiction for Peace, SJP. So Mr. Leguizamon brings over 25 years of experience in the public sector, particularly in peace-building planning and the implementation of humanitarian mine action. He's contributed to the development of public policy for mine action in Colombia, as well as the design of strategic plans for interventions in more than 600 municipalities, which are all affected by anti-personnel mines and unexploded ordnance. Currently, he leads the activation of the restorative line for the implementation of restorative projects. So, Mr. Leguizamon, it's a pleasure to have you with us. I hope you can hear us, and really looking forward to hearing your contribution. So we are going to start now with some opening remarks from the Ambassador Gustavo Galón, who is the Ambassador of Colombia to the United in Geneva. Ambassador Galón, if you could please join us on the podium. And I want you to cheer and give him a round of applause for joining us today. Thank you very much. And you have the floor.
Thank you, Christelle. Excellencies, dear colleagues, dear friends. It is an honor for me to participate in this side event alongside UMAS, United Nations Mine Action Service, and the Special Jurisdiction for Peace, as well as the various stakeholders committed to comprehensive action against antipersonal mines, AICMA, Acción Integral contra Minas Antipersonal. Colombia's experience has helped to establish a comprehensive understanding of action against antipersonal mines as a strategic component of peace building. Beyond its technical and humanitarian dimensions, comprehensive action against antipersonal mines, AICMA, constitutes a structural intervention that contributes to territorial stabilization, the protection of the civilian population, and the guarantee of rights in contexts affected by armed conflict. In this sense, comprehensive action against antipersonal mines, AICMA, cannot be understood solely as an operational response to contamination by explosive ordnance. On the contrary, it is an instrument deeply linked to the pillars of transitional justice and peace building. In context of armed conflict, antipersonal mines not only cause physical harm, but also fragment the social fabric, restrict access to fundamental rights, and perpetuate conditions of confinement, fear, and exclusion. Therefore, their elimination not only saves lives, but also creates the appropriate conditions for the exercise of rights, the recovery of territories, and the rebuilding of trust among communities, the state, and foreign armed actors. In this context, comprehensive action against antipersonal mines has established itself as a bridge between humanitarian action and the structural objectives of peace. This coordination takes on particular significance within the framework of the comprehensive system of truth, justice, reparation, and non-repetition, especially in relation to the Special Jurisdiction for Peace, where AICMA has moved beyond its operational role to establish itself as a strategic component of restorative justice. A key milestone in this process has been the recognition of the comprehensive action against antipersonal mines as one of the restorative measures defined by the Special Jurisdiction for Peace, reflecting its substantive value in providing reparations to victims and ensuring guarantees of non-repetition. This recognition has had a direct impact on structural decisions such as the rolling Take last year, in macro case 01, which establishes specific sanctions for those most responsible. There, IGMA positions itself as a concrete pillar for the implementation of works, projects, and activities with reparative and restorative content, allowing sanctions to transcend the symbolic and translate into verifiable actions that save lives, restore rights, and transform territories. Within this framework, initiatives such as the restorative projects Horizontes Seguros, Secure Horizons, and Abriendo Caminos hacia la Reconciliación y la Paz, Opening Paths towards Reconciliation and Peace, developed in partnership with humanitarian demining organizations such as the Colombian Campaign Against Anti-Personal Mines and Humanicemos DH, Let's Humanize IHL, represent concrete progress in the implementation of these specific sanctions. All these efforts reflect a firm commitment to a peace that is not merely the absence of violence, but one that involves the active presence of justice, dignity, and opportunities for communities. It is also important to highlight the progress made in regional forums for dialogue and consensus building. In particular, IGMA's work has been instrumental in the Regional Peace Co-Construction Roundtable in the Department of Nariño, the south of the country, where tangible achievements have been made in 5 municipalities in the Abades region. This process has helped build trust, advance agreements with the Grupo Comunero del Sur, Comuners of the South group, and facilitate mine action interventions that address the realities and priorities of the communities. This is a concrete example of how humanitarian action, coordinated with regional dialogue processes, can serve as an effective catalyst for peace. These examples demonstrate how Colombia reaffirms its commitment to comprehensive action against anti-personal landmines, transitional justice, and territorial peace building. Finally, I would like to take advantage of this scenario to express our gratitude for the coordinated efforts we have been carrying out with the Geneva International Center for Humanitarian Demining, particularly in the context of the commitments agreed or made under the peace agreement. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, and I hope that you were all able to hear the statements. We heard a little bit of music, and this is a preview of the reception, because this year, at the NGM reception, there will be a band. But I think for being from Colombia, I think you have an appreciation for music, so I really hope you accept our apologies for that. So now I just want to highlight that the GICHD published a paper last year on humanitarian mine action and peace agreements. And 11 countries recently included humanitarian mine action into their peace agreements as an action to enable returns, security and institution building, and as a component of disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration, as well as transitional justice. So this is a very good trend, and we hope that many more countries will follow suit. So let me turn to Ambassador Privitelli. Considering the evolving nexus between mine action and long-term peace building, how can international strategies better integrate mine action, not only as a security and humanitarian response, but as a catalyst for sustainable peace and restorative justice?
Thank you so much, Christelle, and thanks for the invitation. It is a great pleasure being here, and I would like to to pass my special thanks to Ambassador Gustavo Galon, who's on the board of the GICHD and who informs us constantly about the mine action efforts in Colombia and brought us together with the Special Jurisdiction for Peace and inspired us to work more intensively on these questions in Colombia. Thank you. When it comes to the study, which was, by the way, produced by my dear colleague Beatrice, who's over there in the corner, we see different forms in which mine action is reflected in peace and ceasefire agreements. One example is the ceasefire agreement in Sudan in 2004. Their land release was mentioned explicitly as a precondition for deploying the UN mission. Then in 1991 already, we have a peace agreement for Colombia, the Paris Agreement, which linked mine action to the return of displaced people. So mine action mentioned as a precondition for development, for return, for deployment of peacekeeping operations. We have a similar formulation in the Eritrea-Ethiopia peace agreement. And then we have this unique setup in the Colombia peace agreement of 2016, where we mention mine action as a basis for reconstruction, basic infrastructure, and also in the context of transitional justice, as Gustavo just mentioned. This is a unique setup, and I find it interesting to link accountability to mine action, because we have to speak about responsibilities. Who laid the mines, and how could these institutions and people contribute to clearing the land? I find this fascinating. So we have accountability, reconciliation, preconditions. Now, maybe a bit more concrete even, is the reflection of mine action, the references to mine action in ceasefire agreements. We've been asked as an institution, as a center, what should be in a ceasefire agreement which would facilitate humanitarian demining after the war, after the conflict. And we always, of course, recommend an exchange of maps, to have an exchange of deployment maps explicitly in a ceasefire agreement. We recommended that in certain cases, and it happened in certain cases. When it comes to maps, of course, you can only use those in cases they exist, and in cases the mines were deployed in a systematic way, maybe not through artillery and so on. So this is something we recommend. It is also a confidence-building measure. And I would go one step further. We are in a period of a lot of violent conflicts, and at the same time, ceasefire peace plans being arranged. So what is our role in these moments? We've been approached in these moments. We see a peace plan in Gaza. We see a peace plan for Armenia, Azerbaijan. It is important to see this as a crucial moment for mine action and to try to set some standards, to use it as a moment for confidence building. Then we come to the question of accountability, and we never discussed this, I think, at least not yesterday or today in the context of the conference held here. Accountability. We might have to ask who is paying for mine action. Do we need compensation? If it's a war of aggression, should the aggressor pay for mine action after the conflict? These are questions I think we should not hesitate to discuss. And finally, Christelle, I know the role of UNMAS in all these post-conflict areas, and I know how much you engage, your institution, your organization, for the strengthening the normative framework. Luckily, we've seen that in certain contexts. Certain contexts after a war, the countries abandoned landmines, abandoned cluster munition, and joined, for instance, the Ottawa and Oslo Convention. I think that's something we should encourage parties to a conflict after a ceasefire, after a peace plan. It's not easy, but it's a very concrete step to confidence building and disarmament. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Tobias. Very inspiring and gives us a lot to reflect on, especially at this time where there's so many conflicts that are emerging, getting worse, trying to be resolved, and how we need to be at each step advocating for mine action and also for keeping those maps, recording where the explosive weapons have been used so that we can later on clear them faster, cheaper, and protecting the staff who are going to do the job. Excellent. So now let's move to Antonio Armentano. Colombia has a long experience engaging humanitarian mine action into former and current peace negotiation. Can you please share some concrete examples of how mine action has worked in practice to build trust and contribute to reconciliation?
Thank you, Christelle. Good afternoon. I will try to frame this in a simple and intuitive way, using a couple of examples. No? But first of all, I would like to invite you to think to a relation. So initially, when we think about mine action and peace agreements, we see like a kind of unidirectional relation, like almost a causation principle between peace agreement and mine action. So normally we are used to a peace agreement that is signed or a ceasefire that is signed, and then a clearance operation, demining operation can start, and then the victim start to decrease, and so on. But I invite you to reflect on the other way of this relation. So what about the implication, what about the support that mine action can give directly to peace agreement and to ceasefires agreement? So essentially, from 2012 to 2016, UNMAS has been supporting the so-called Havana process. So the Havana process was a negotiation process between the government and the FARC, which was held in Cuba. And essentially, UNMAS, together with the Colombian government and other organizations, supported and tried to mainstream mine action into the negotiation. So this, first of all, led to what have been called peace gestures. So a number of initiatives, even during the negotiation, like handover of more than 3,000 landmines, return of weapons and ammunition, and other gestures during the negotiation. But also, it enabled to move forward and to reach what was called the final peace agreement in 2016. So I think this is very important because in the 2016 peace agreement we have different elements of mine action which are literally embedded into the peace agreement in different chapters of the peace agreement. So namely the chapter related to former combatants, reincorporation, justice, DDR, and then the clearance operation in areas affected by illicit crops, prioritized ethnic territories, and so on. So I would like to use also an example that Ambassador Gallón was mentioning before. He mentioned this organization, Humanicemos DH. No? So UNMAS had the pleasure to support the capacity building and the very same creation from the beginning of this organization. This organization is fully composed by former combatants. So at the beginning were around 100, 120. Now they continue operating. And I think this is, I would say a bit in a bold way, this is a revolutionary concept because we have former combatants reintegrated into the society which are able to achieve their livelihoods and to work for also restoration of justice and bring back to the communities what was stolen during the conflict. So I think this is an important element. Humanicemo was certified by the Colombian government as an operator of mine action and also was able to provide EO retraining, victim assistance, and so on. So this, of course, is a clear example, but I would like to move forward to another example very briefly, which is an ongoing project that has been implemented. And basically the origin of the project was the very same peace agreement of 2016. So in line with the framework of the agreement, it was decided, it was agreed that the FARC will contribute to the supply of key technical, tactical, and strategic information on the location of explosive ordnances and landmines. So to comply, basically, to fulfill this part of the agreement, it was created a mechanism which is called the tripartite mechanism, which is composed by the UN, namely UNMAS and the verification mission in Colombia, the government, particularly the OCCP, the Office of the High Commissioner for Peace, and the Mine Action Authority, and also the former combatants. So I think this is also a very good example because it managed to go beyond what is the normal mine action operation, and it achieved a number of key and strategic outcomes, particularly the geolocalization and the location of explosive ordnances, the landmines also, which enable, this information, the operators, the very same governments, to improve the efficiency. And also it's currently developing a document of historical memory, which is also part of the non-repetition principle. So I think those are all clear examples of building trust between former adversary and contribute to reconciliation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Antonio, for these very practical examples. Let's now move to Donatella. A long-lasting peace requires, among other factors, to build local ownership and trust among local communities. How can Mine Action learn from the Interpeace global experience to support effectively peace-building initiatives?
Thank you very much. And first of all, thank you very much for inviting Interpeace, this very interesting and very important dialogue and conversation. So first of all, the intersection between mine action and peace building is highlighted very clearly in the UN Agenda for Peace that explicitly calls for addressing the challenges of landmine presence within a peace-building agenda. And even if mine action pillars are mostly characterized as technical support, surveying, demining, victim assistance, mine action, one way or another, touches upon, is influenced, and consequently also influences the political and the socio-economic context. So drawing on Interpeace global experience, mine action actors can shift from being primarily technical and humanitarian to becoming more explicitly like peace-responsive contributors to long-term stability. Secondly, what is complementary to mine action from the peace-building practice is the added value of conflict sensitivity to the mine action activities. Not only to do context, peace and conflict analysis to avoid and to mitigate the risks created by conflict that can have an impact, of course, on mine action projects in certain contexts, but also to look more into a two-way synergy between mine action and peace building. So how mine action projects affect the context in which they operate, and not only they are affected. And this is because in places, in locations where mine action organizations, stakeholders, operators, actors, national institutions operate, the demand for mine action activities comes in parallel of other development, humanitarian and peace-building interventions with processes that are operating simultaneously and very much interdependent. So creating silos is keeping the silos is something that doesn't help into creating synergies between mine action and peace building. And that's where Mine Action is operating within a network of interacting factors and actors, as I said, where its peace-responsive impact should be maximized to improve the effectiveness of its technical programming, and then contribute to then peace building, stabilization, sustainability efforts in a particular context. And a third aspect is that participatory approaches, integrated peace and conflict and socioeconomic analysis that are particularly introduced from the peace-building sector are now prerequisites in mine action programming, as practice and research show that people's needs don't present themselves in silos, as I was saying, and now are more, in need of integrated approaches more than ever probably now in a moment of shrinking aid, shrinking resources, and availability of resources. So to give, a concluding perspective on how, the complementarity of mine action and peace building, or mine action development in a peace building perspective, mine action can evolve from, and should evolve, and is evolving, I would say, from a technical enabler of peace building into a direct peace building actor. And this is by being conflict sensitive, peace responsive, as we were saying, centering local ownership and inclusion, including also minorities, women, young people, so including also more weak groups, using its presence, operational presence, to foster dialogue and trust, and linking clearance to livelihoods and governance, so very localized and context-specific as well. So basically, the shift should be the thinking that peace is not a byproduct of technical work, but it must designed into it. And this is the way peace building and mine action can function together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and we should send you to speak to the UN Peacebuilding Fund, because we have a peacebuilding fund in the UN, and I don't think it has been supporting mine action as much as we'd like. So maybe we can do joint advocacy, but of course it's a fund that also has, I think, specific countries that are being targeted, and not necessarily those that are most contaminated. Perhaps we need our own peace-building fund for mine action. Fantastic. I will now give the floor to Mr. Leguizamon. I hope he is able to connect. I think, can you hear us? I think you...
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
And so you have the floor. I think you're going to talk to us about the ruling established that the high restorative value of mine action, and if you could explain how the landmine action projects were designed to facilitate the participation of those people that are appearing in front of your jurisdiction. Thank you.
Thank you for this question.
The recognition of the high restorative value of mine action by the SJP is the result of a gradual process that has been built since 2016, creating concrete conditions for the participation of appearing parties. First, in 2016, with the signing of the final peace agreement, the foundations of transitional and restorative justice were established. In this context, mine action began to be understood as a space for building trust, based on early experiences such as the peace gestures in Santa Elena, Meta, and El Morajon, Antioquia. Second, in 2019, a key milestone was reached with the adoption of Law 1957, particularly Article 141, which provides the legal framework enabling the participation of appearing parties in activities related to the clearance and removal of mines and other explosive devices. This element is essential as it ensures legal certainty and enables their participation within the system. Subsequently, in 2024, in coordination with the National Authority and the Colombian Campaign Against Mines, a specific restorative line within comprehensive mine action was consolidated through the design and implementation of the Safe Horizons project. This project included risk education workshops reaching more than 3,000 people, support for 30 victims through productive projects, and the strengthening of community capacities. It also enabled a more structured participation of appearing parties in the territory, involving 18 participants, 7 former members of the public forces and 11 former FARC members. In 2025, in coordination with the National Authority, the Colombian Campaign Against Mines, and Humanitarian DH, this approach was further strengthened through the project, opening pathways for reconciliation and peace. This initiative expanded participation to risk education training processes, support for non-technical humanitarian demining studies, and the development of community infrastructure initiatives, consolidating the link between responsibility, reparation, and territorial action. Building on these two experiences, in 2026 a new phase of expansion is underway. With the support of the United Nations Multi-Partner Trust Fund, 4 new lines of restorative projects will be launched in coordination with the judicial chambers, 2 focused on strengthening humanitarian demining interventions, with up to $900,000 each, and 2 aimed at expanding mine risk education efforts, with up to $350,000 per project. These resources have already been secured, and the next step is to launch the calls for proposals to initiate implementation. Priority has been given to territories such as Antioquia, Choco, Norte de Santander, Nariño, and Caquetá, with the possibility of expanding to other regions, including the Caribbean coast and Catatumbo. Overall, this process demonstrates that the participation of appearing parties has been carefully designed over time, combining a clear legal framework, targeted territorial interventions, and verifiable actions that bring restorative justice to life in affected communities. In other words, this approach reflects the effective implementation of the humanitarian development peace nexus.
Thank you very much for this summary. Mr. Leguizamon, would you like to add a few comments from your perspective to this very fast presentation? Thank you.
Thank you. Estamos atentos a alguna pregunta.
We are here if there is any further question in response to this question. Mr. Leguizamon would also like to tell you that we have prepared answer for the other question, respecting the time that was assigned for the interventions. We have this other answer.
Very good. So we'll go to the next segment of the questions, which is more focused on the restorative justice approach. So we'll start with Ambassador Privitelli. Do you have any additional suggestion or recommendation on how we use mine action for restorative justice?
Thank you. Yeah, Colombia gives probably the most interesting example, definitely. Colleagues said it already, it's important to see mine action as an integrated part in an entire peace continuum. So not only at a certain point, but it can be something which starts in conflict and continues pre-conflict. Sometimes we could also think of mine action, preparation for mine action, preparation of institutions in a phase of escalation already. Of course, countries which are luckily not affected might not think about these institutions. They may have institutions dealing with residual contamination, but it is something which might be established in a condition of peace or in a condition, let's say, of instability early in a conflict. If we take the example of Syria, of course, we benefit from the great experience of the Northeastern Syrian Mine Action Center, and very rapidly in Damascus, center was established now for the entire country. But prevention could mean to invest in a situation of instability, in particular into risk education and into creating preconditions for the case that you would need mine action in a destabilizing center. And then, yes, hopefully at a certain point, at the ceasefire point or the peace agreement point, you would encourage joint engagement of both sides in these activities. Once again, the organization mentioned by our colleagues from Colombia are probably the best example that I know. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tobias. And I can see on your slide, we also talk about the importance of coordination evolving according to the context, which I think Colombia has been also very good at adapting. Now going to Antonio, from your perspective, how can mine action be better positioned in peace-building frameworks and restorative justice?
Thank you. To answer this question, I first of all would like to say that this is something we have been discussing a lot in a long-term conversation with the colleagues of GICHD. So this is also one of the reasons we start developing joint initiatives and also this panel discussion. I think humanitarian mine action in Colombia has shown clearly that his role can go, far beyond security factor and immediate protection and transform into a long-term outcome. So, of course, EORE, risk reduction, clearance are very essential part and task. But this task can really transform, and if they are embedded into comprehensive framework and in participatory framework, mine action becomes a driver for peace. And I think this is the key message that I would like to share with you. As I mentioned in my previous statement, of course, the Colombia experience showed that mine action can be a platform for dialogue and also reconciliation. Since the beginning, of course, it was not easy because at the beginning it was pretty much focusing on operational aspect of mine action, but then it was possible to transform and increase coordination. And since I would say the 2016 peace agreement, it was possible to have a more coordinated platform to ensure and connect mine action operation with peace building. And I would like to take profit of this answer to acknowledge and to congratulate the government of Colombia for the continued effort and also for the outstanding results. Of course, thanks also to the support of a number of donors that managed to step in, among them, of course, SDC, the Swiss Development Corporation. I will mention also JICA, the Japanese government. So it was possible to increase this connection between mine action and peace building. And I would say that the participatory dimension is crucial because it highlights something that I think it's a very crucial element because those who lived basically the danger and carry the scars of a conflict are at the center and are the decision makers and are contributing to the success of the reparation. So essentially, and try to summarize and to conclude a little bit, I think that mine action contributes clearly to restorative justice by turning knowledge, of course, into a collective memory and reparative action. So it is, I think, the integration of this dimension that makes mine action sustainable and helps the community not only in the present today, but also transform society to transitional justice and long-term reconciliation.
Thanks very much, Antonio. Now turning to Donatella. So Donatella, you are an expert in community-driven peace-building processes. How can we be more strategic in the way we plan mine action to build community-based peace building?
Thank you indeed. The way we work is through and with the communities. So that's the main experience of Interpeace and other peace-building organizations. Of course, humanitarian mine action already creates safety and access, but if it's treated purely as a technical exercise, as a technical service, as we were saying, it misses some opportunities. So to strengthen community-driven peace building, there must be a shift, which is more about changing how mine action is designed, is delivered as well, and now is also implemented. The way Interpeace and we work with communities and we advocate for adaptation of practice at different levels. At operational level, at policy level, and at system level. And I will briefly say what are these three levels for us. On the operational level, mine action stakeholders need to ensure improved participation, inclusiveness for those who are at risk of being left behind, with strengthened focus on outcomes indicators development, monitoring, learning for evidence-based policy and decision-making processes that are relevant to the broader national development and peace-building objectives. And to build a more peace-responsive mine action project, we need to develop the skills, the experience of the colleagues across the sector through training, the development of specific tools, integration of conflict sensitivities into organizational processes, and in this way supporting changes to the ways of working that will recognize the role of conflict sensitivity approaches and the importance of conflict sensitivity approaches. This commitment on the operational level helps in building evidence, evidence-based on how mine action impacts on conflict dynamics and contributes to peace. And this is the way, we perceive the contribution to building an organizational culture that is conducive to that. On the policy level, we should mainstream and integrate mine action into broader sustainable development, and then, also pleading for diversified funding, innovative partnership with the private sector or among the policy, the research, and operational communities, so also to increase the impact of mine action. And on the system level, we need to build a sector culture around a shared understanding of the necessity of conflict sensitivity to the mine action and peace building, and build a vision which includes an objective that is looking at changing the role or pivoting the role of mine action to contribute to transforming conflict dynamics and building peace. A clear vision and purpose for this is an indication of institutional and leadership commitment, and it will shape decisions on how work gets done in communities, how the communities experience and benefit also from mine action. And so mine action is often the first very visible sign of change in a post-conflict settings, because that moment in which the land becomes usable again is a political and social moment, is a political and social process. If this is handled within and together with the communities, it can reduce grievances, it can build cooperation, and it can strengthen local governance also in peace building and mine action. If it is not handled in that way, of course it can reinforce inequalities, it can trigger disputes, it can also miss the opportunity to do bring the communities to contribute to those processes. So that is the three levels in which we see how we can work with communities in mine action and peace building. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. It's very interesting to think about the perspective of communities and this turning point where, the deminers arrive. I mean, first you have the non-technical survey. Actually, before that, you have the community liaison. And your community, and suddenly people are coming to talk to you about where are the explosive ordnance? Where was the battle? We would like to remove things, those dangerous items. And how, it's like this signal from, maybe we're finally moving from conflict to peace and recovery. But then it's a very long process. From that moment of the community liaison, the non-technical survey, the technical survey, and then, the clearance and the land release, sometimes it's years. So peace building and mine action both can take a lot of time, but definitely community involvement is critical. Let's now turn to Mr. Silva. 10 years after the signing of the final agreement, the balance is bittersweet in Colombia. How can mine action inclusion in peace negotiation be strengthened to be more effective in the future?
Thank you. I think one of the best lessons of the previous peace negotiation is that when humanitarian mine action is included in peace processes, it can not only save lives, but also build confidence and restore territorial conditions. But it's most effective when it's not treated as a late technical annex. It needs to be understood as a strategic peace-building measure from the very beginning. In my view, there are 4 priorities for strengthening mine action in future peace negotiations. First, mine action should be integrated early as part of the de-escalation arrangements, rather than waiting for final accord. And I think that's one of the differences between 2016 peace agreement and the total peace position of the actual government. Because contrary to the motto of the previous peace agreement, where nothing was agreed until everything was agreed, in this government, mine action has been part of the negotiation process, not the final agreement of the negotiation. So that's one of the things. So mine action can serve as a humanitarian bridge in the first stages of a dialogue. Localized humanitarian agreements can make it possible to carry out the mining, mine risk education, and victim assistance even before a broader political settlement is reached. This has 2 advantages. It provides immediate relief to communities, and it creates one of the first concrete demonstrations that the parties are genuinely willing to reduce harm. So I think that's a big difference. One is mine action is included during the negotiations, even though there is no full agreement in everything. And the other is the approach in a territorial perspective. A previous agreement was national, so the country was taken as a full entity. Now it's territorial. And when we are approaching territories as living entities, we are seeing and experiencing the differences. Because now the discussion is not only between the non-state actor and the national government, but the discussion needs to be done among several other actors, victims, indigenous communities, the military forces, community based organizations. So it broadens the discussion. Second, should be framed through the triple nexus: humanitarian, development, and peace. Clearance alone is not enough. Mine action becomes more effective when it is linked to land restitution, rural reform, territorial development, safe mobility, and the reactivation of local economies. In other words, we must plan demining not only to remove explosive hazards, but to enable communities to recover rights, livelihoods, and opportunities. That is when peace becomes tangible. And we are experiencing and seeing that in country. Humanitarian civilian operations that only do clearance are facing more obstacles and challenges than those that have a more comprehensive approach. Yeah? When communities receive certain organizations, they receive more things from the organization than the actual clearance. Even though it's very important to do clearance and to release land and to save lives, communities in Colombia need more than the just actual clearance. So that's why mine action needs to have a more comprehensive approach. Third, Colombia's more recent experience has also shown the value of giving greater space to victims and communities. In the current government's peace efforts, these actors have been more present, and there has been a stronger attempt to sustain dialogue with territories and affected populations than in earlier processes, such as the peace agreement of 2016. That matters because mine action becomes more relevant, more legitimate, and ultimately more sustainable when communities are not treated simply as beneficiaries, but as actors whose perspectives help shape priorities. Looking ahead, the challenge is to consolidate that progress so that the participation of victims and communities is not only heard, but also reflected in the prioritization of areas, in the design of humanitarian measures, and in the follow-up of commitments. Fourth, a stronger monitoring, trust building, and verification mechanisms are essential. Inclusion in a peace agreement is only meaningful if compliance can be tracked. That means clear protocols, updated standards for operations in complex security environments, and independent or joint verification mechanisms to confirm that armed groups stop using new devices, provide reliable information, and respect humanitarian space. So, if I had to summarize the lesson in one sentence, it would be this. The future effectiveness of humanitarian mine action in peace negotiations depends on treating it not only as clearance activity, but as an early confidence-building measure, a vehicle for territorial stabilization, and a community-centered pathway to sustainable peace.
Thank you very much. And this will definitely go into the summary of the NDM. What a beautiful quote. And indeed, it is so important to involve the communities and also to have an integrated approach to mine action. I know some mine action organizations just want to be the best at clearance, but if you don't have risk education and victim assistance also in your portfolio, this will probably reduce the acceptance by the community. So I think having a more packaged service provision is much better to create trust with the community. I completely agree with that, and I'm the big advocate for that with my own organization. Now, moving on to Mr. Leguizamon. The centrality of victims as one of the principles of the special jurisdiction has been promoting to guarantee their participation. How does the jurisdiction measure the satisfaction of victims? And we're talking about monitoring here and results, and the degree of restoration provided by mine action. You have the floor.
Thank you.
At the SJP, the centrality of victims is operationalized by ensuring their participation throughout the entire cycle of restorative projects. It is precisely through this cycle that both victim satisfaction and the scope of reparation are assessed. This process is structured around 4 key stages, as shown in the slide. First, the design phase, where actors such as the national authority, the Colombian campaign against mines, Humanismos, and the SJP are involved. At this stage, victims actively contribute to shaping the interventions, ensuring that they respond to their needs and expectations. Second, implementation, where participation takes with the participation of 30 direct victims and 18 appearing parties. This direct engagement allows for the collection of immediate feedback on the relevance and usefulness of the interventions. Third, monitoring and follow-up, which is carried out on a continuous basis with the Executive Secretariat, the Colombian Campaign Against Mines, Humanismos, COSUDE, UNDP, and other stakeholders. Through regular follow-up spaces, including monthly meetings, progress is assessed and direct feedback from victims is systematically gathered. Fourth, lessons learned, where actors such as UNDP, Humanismos DH, and the SJP, including the Advisory Office for Project Structuring, OAEP, and the Subdirectorate for Institutional Strengthening, contribute to systematizing the experience. At this stage, victims' perspectives are incorporated to improve the design and implementation of future interventions. In addition, these mechanisms are complemented by external verification exercises. A key example is the assessment supported by the government of Switzerland, which evaluated the outcomes of productive projects 1 year after their implementation in Dabeba. The results show concrete impacts. 30 productive initiatives remain active, victims have requested continued support from appearing parties on their own land, and several community initiatives have contributed to improving living conditions. Overall, this demonstrates that victim satisfaction and the contribution to reparation are not measured solely through indicators, but through meaningful participation in restorative processes, the sustainability of outcomes, and tangible improvements in affected territories.
Atentos, cualquier pregunta.
We are available if there is any further question to this matter.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions or observations from the audience? Yes, many. So the gentleman here, and if you could just introduce yourself before you ask your question, and then we'll go here, and then...
Sorry, Christelle. I would like to have the floor to answer one question that I prepared.
Oh,
that
of course, please go ahead.
I wasn't asked. So the question is, I think you have it there, is Colombia already has a tradition of including mine action into two recent peace processes. Can you tell us how humanitarian mine action has been recently integrated within the total peace policy? I think I have addressed some points, but I would like to extend in my answer. Under the total peace policy, it has been positioned as a strategic instrument for territorial transformation. The thing about the territorial conditions, not just nationwide, but also in the territorial transformation, civilian protection, and peace building. That said, I think it's important to begin with a note of realism. This integration has not been uniform. It has depended largely on the characteristics of each negotiation table, on the territorial context, and also on the degree to which the non-state armed group involved understands the strategic value of mine action, not only as a humanitarian issue, but also as a concrete confidence building and de-escalation measure. Its recent integration can be explained at three complementary levels and one specific institutional arrangement that we did within the government, the IMA group. First, at legal and policy level, humanitarian mine action now has an explicit place within the architecture of total peace. So it's within the legislation and the norms. It is recognized as something that can and should begin while broader dialogue efforts are still underway to protect communities and create safer conditions for state presence and institutional recovery. Second, at the level of continuity with the 2016 final agreement, the current policy treats that agreement as a living roadmap. In that sense, mine action is integrated across several dimensions. Decontamination through the provision of information by former combatants, reintegration through socioeconomic and vocational pathways linked to mine action, restorative justice through actions that can contribute to sanctions and reparative measures before the special jurisdiction for peace, and ethnic and rural implementation by helping create safe conditions for land restitution, rural development, and community recovery. Third, in active dialogues under total peace, mine action has become a humanitarian bridge and also a confidence-building measure. The IMA group has updated national standards so that accredited operators can work in areas with active security factors, which is essential in a country where some of the most affected communities are still facing insecurity. This has already created opportunities in concrete dialogue settings. For instance, in the Department of Nariño with the Comuneros del Sur, which is a non-state actor, Mine action has supported territorial stabilization by enabling operations in historically affected municipalities. And in other peace dialogues, mine action is being prioritized to help establish humanitarian corridors, combining not only technical demining, but also mine risk education, victim assistance, and supervised destruction of explosive stockpiles. Finally, the specific institutional arrangement. Within the Mine Action Group, we have created a dedicated focal point for peace building, and that has significantly strengthened these efforts. This has allowed us to improve coordination across government agencies, reinforce advocacy around the strategic value of mine action, and promote projects that deliberately combine mine action and peace-building objectives. In other words, it has helped us move from isolated technical interventions toward a more integrated approach in which mine action is linked to stabilization, institutional presence, community trust, and territorial recovery. Under total peace, mine action is no longer only about removing explosive hazards. It is about opening humanitarian space, enabling state action, and making peace tangible in the territories.
Thank you. That was very impressive, and I think you have created a template for total peace that we should send to all countries who are in the meeting today. It's really fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing that. So now going back to the three colleagues who had raised their hands, please.
Thank you very much. I have, my name is Camilo Serna. I'm the director of the Colombian campaign to ban landmines, or CCCM, or against landmines. Well, I have a comment and a question. The comment is 15 years ago, where there were no guidelines. Everything started from the individuals who build all this process and who bring all the things that we have now. I want to recognize these people because here is Esteban, for example, from MPA, who build and coordinate all the process in this pilot project with the FARC. Even meanwhile, the negotiations were held. Lina from UNMAS in that moment, and also Álvaro Jiménez, who is not here, but I think it was the person who built all this strategy with the FARC. He right now is threat because he tried to include the landmines issues in the peace negotiation with the actual government. And it's important to recognize that the persons, the individuals are important in this framework. And I have a question to Rosenberg and to Antonio. It's about the involvement of the Humanicemos in the process, because Humanicemos is an organization who their members was FARC members. So one question that we did to help, especially Rosenberg, Paulo, who are here, is how we can deal with some people who was perpetrators involved in process as leaders of the process of these TORs, that is work, reparations, things, because they were perpetrators, and they are including in the list that GAP sent to all the mine action organizations to be part of this process as a leader of this process. How we can deal with that? Because
thank you very much. So I'm going to redirect this question to Mr. Leguizamón.
Bueno, muchas gracias. Gracias a Camilo. Un saludo especial a todos los que están. Voy a contestar inicialmente en español y me van a ayudar con la traducción. Nosotros y cualquier proceso de paz tiene que permitir el trabajo con los combatientes. Ese es un desafío. La oportunidad está en que cuando se trata de acción humanitaria, los comparecientes pueden jugar varios roles. Nosotros sabemos que Humanicemos DH cumplió todos los protocolos y bajo el amparo del sector y de UNMAS logró sus acreditaciones. En ese sentido, nosotros lo consideramos un operador con toda su legitimidad para actuar en territorio. Otra cosa es que algunos de sus miembros u otros miembros de las FARC tengan que cumplir procesos restaurativos ante la JEP. Y ese tema es un asunto que se lidera principalmente por la magistratura. Para concluir esta respuesta, no podemos, digamos, bloquear o pensar en que no puedan participar personas que estuvieron en armas en el marco del conflicto. Frente al tema de la certificación en Estados Unidos, ya hablamos.
Okay. To everyone present here, thank you. I will start by responding in Spanish and later I will be supported with the translation. Thank you, Camilo, for this question, and it's very valuable your voice here. To start, any peace process must allow for engagement with former combatants. This is indeed a challenge. The opportunity lies in the fact that in the context of humanitarian actions, participants can play different roles. We know that Humanitarian DH has complied with all protocols and under the oversight of the sector at the United Nations Mine Action Service. Humanicemos has obtained its accreditation, and in that sense, we consider it an operator with full legitimacy to act in the field. Another matter is that some of its members or other former members of the FARC must undergo restorative processes before the jurisdiction special for peace. But this is led by the judicial chambers and sections, and we can't think in a restorative process without involving the former members of the FARC-EP in this restorative process.
Sí. Para cerrar, digamos, todos los que estamos aquí como corresponsables de impulsar la acción humanitaria en el mundo, podemos ser garantes también ante múltiples estados que mantienen algunas certificaciones dentro de sus procesos administrativos o de justicia. Si bien es cierto, eso puede representar algunos desafíos, también nosotros comprendemos que múltiples estados están comprometidos con la paz de Colombia y en ese sentido también siguen apoyando estos procesos de paz y comprenden de que algunos combatientes ahora están en construcción de paz y cumpliendo requisitos ante esta jurisdicción.
Okay. To all of us here as co-responsible actors in advancing humanitarian action worldwide, can also serve as guarantors before multiple states that maintain certain certification requirements within their administrative or judicial processes. While these may indeed present some challenges, we also understand that many states remain committed to peace in Colombia. In that regard, they continue to support these peace processes and recognize that some former combatants are now engaged in peace building and are fulfilling the requirements established by this jurisdiction. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And the reception is in 10 minutes, so please let's be very concise with the questions so we can have several. Over to you, and then Lina, and then there was one more gentleman. Yeah.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for your presentations. I'm Fabio Silva from the Inter-American Defense Board. We're currently working with 2 humanitarian mine actions missions deployed in Colombia. My question is about the future of humanitarian mine action in Colombia is addressed to Mr. Silva. As Colombia advances toward more nationally led and restorative model of mine action, what concrete role should international mechanisms play in this new framework? ensuring both operational effectiveness and tangible community-centered outcomes, in particular, Organization of American States. Thank you very much.
Thank
Please,
you.
Mr. Silva. Yeah, Silva.
Thank you for your question. I think the commitment of the national government towards the implementation of the Ottawa Convention is there. We have recently presented the extension request for Article 5, which was gladly approved. So the political endorsement by the Colombian government is there. We have several lines of work, not only in terms of clearance, but in risk education, victims assistance, the ownership of the mine action coordination. So the need for international cooperation is still there. There are several gaps in each of the pillars of the convention. And regarding OEAs, we are working closely in the transference plan in order to own the management and coordination of the external monitoring body. And we are planning to have more approach regarding the way OEAs can help us improve and strengthen our technical capabilities in order to be more efficient and more consistent towards the goal of the extension request.
Thank you. Lina, briefly. Lina used to be quality manager, right, for mine action for UNMAS in Colombia. She's part of the peace builders, people who have been using mine action for peace in Colombia. So really pleased to have you here.
Yeah, I was, it's just a comment, and it's about, and I think it builds on what Camilo said, and a little bit on what Donatella was saying, and it's conflict sensitivity and then localization. I think one of the biggest or one of the key and critical aspects of what happened in Colombia and what UNMAS facilitated was through localization, not just, so using the humanitarian mine action stakeholders that were there, using the organizations that were working in mine action already for a long time, that had the experience, that had the conflict sensitivity and had already in place measures to ensure that communities were not going to be affected with what the peace agreement was bringing, using locals, using nationals that understood the conflict, that understood what was going on in the country, what was going on with the communities, but also that understood the legal frameworks, the institutional frameworks. So we could actually have, with all those head togethers, a successful planning. If we see it from like to the back, it was successful. And I think UNMAS is now showcasing what was a big effort of localization. And that might not be mentioned as a key component, but I think that that's something that has to be regarded and that has to be taken into account, because that was fundamental.
Thank you very much. I remember when I visited Colombia 2.5 years ago, the UNMAS team was 96% Colombian. So it's really a good practice on the localization. Last comment for you, and then we'll have to close.
Thanks. Yeah, very quickly. I'm Esteban, I'm from DRC, but at the time I was the program manager for the pilot project.
DRC, you said?
Right now, yes, DRC. But at the time I was MPA, and I just wanted to make a very quick comment on the peace process and some of the things that have been discussed here. I think echoing a little bit what Camilo was saying in terms of several, stakeholders from mine action being involved in the peace process, and HMA particularly made a lot of sense. And I'm thinking about the importance of including mine action donors, and I'm thinking of Norway and the role it played significantly there, not only as a guarantor for the peace process, but kind of like the funding that was included in making the pilot project a reality, and also the involvement and the significance of mine action operators as well. And I'm thinking about MPA at the time. Kind of like neutral to the whole process, it actually created a significant difference in terms of how the de-escalation, because I would have to disagree with you, Mauricio, to an extent that this process at the time was a de-escalation measure within the peace process. Nothing was signed at the time, but it significantly helped throughout that. And then finally, just a very quick comment on conflict sensitivity. I think there's a lot of lessons to learn from that particular initiative. I can say do no harm, conflict sensitivity, many of the things were not a priority, and I think we have a lot of things to talk about as lessons learned in terms of how future peace processes should include conflict sensitivity as a must before anything is being implemented. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You know, when people talk about conflict sensitivity, I just don't understand how we can still be having this discussion. I mean, from what I see, but my colleagues are so conflict sensitive. That's what we do in the mine action business. You cannot survive if you're not conflict sensitive. So yeah, just wanted to say that. I want to thank, of course, the panelists very much for their contribution. Thank Ambassador Gaillon and his teams who have been collaborating with all of us here in Geneva, organizing so many events around mine action. I really thank you deeply. And thank the government of Colombia for its commitment to total peace and to, you know, invite all of us to support you and to learn from your experience. This is really inspiring. We have heard about the catalytic role of mine action for peace building, and I hope that all of you will be advocates so that we can use this experience for other countries and also complete the peace in Colombia. Thank you very much and enjoy the reception.